All right. Evening, everyone. All right. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program certification class. Hope everyone's doing well this day. Please be seated if you are standing. I'd like to welcome all of our guests locally and, of course, our students, I guess I should say, not guests. Just said you could be seated. Here with us here, training in Abilene, but also throughout the world. We know we have people watching from all over the world, in Africa and Asia and Russia and different places that are watching in South America and participating along. So we do welcome you to this class, and we do thank you for taking the opportunity out of your busy schedule, because I know all of our schedules are pretty busy, to work on improving your character, because that's what we're working on and that's what we're focusing on in this class here. And in case you're just joining us for the first time here, we're in the character unit of the intermediate series here of the Peaceful Solution, and we are still in chapter 1, and we're going to be picking up there in chapter 1 on page 9. But before we get there, I want to go back and rehearse a little bit what the previous teacher covered here in regards to morals and values. Morals and values. If you look back to page 6 there, under values, it says values are what you believe in or feel strongly about. Okay, and of course our values are a part of what helps to shape our character. Okay, you can't go through life without any values. We all do have values. Sometimes things are a little bit more prominent in our lives as far as values are concerned. Some things are a little bit more subtle, but we all have values, and those values are developed over time through, as what we covered on page 4 here. They're developed through our family values, and of course experiences and influences that come from people within our environment, such as our family, which is the first group of people that we would have encountered after we were born. And then later on, as we move on in life, we encounter people at school, people in our neighborhood, extended family members, people at work, and of course as we grow, these values have a tendency to change over a period of time. But when we understand our values and how they relate to our character, then we can examine ourselves and look at our, like it says here, the sum total of everything you value becomes your value system. Look at our values and see if those values are beneficial for the building of a positive character or if they're detrimental to building that positive character. So we covered it. We talked about values and where they come from, how they shape us, because they do play an important part in the developing of our character. And as we said here at the bottom of that paragraph on page 6, it says, of course, as you interact with people other than your parents, you will adopt other values as well. And of course, the previous teacher gave you some examples of some of the things that he valued when he was young and growing up. And as he got older, some of those values changed. And then we talked a little bit about morals, okay, as we got to page 8 here. And we talked about morals and what they have to do with our character, because it's very important that we understand what morals are, where they come from, how they're developed, what they mean, because in understanding that, then we can understand how we can more successfully develop a positive character. And at the very top of that page there, under morals, what do they have to do with my character? That title there, we'll read the whole paragraph. It says, regardless of culture, religion, or environment, there are some values that all people share. They are called moral values. A moral value is like a line that divides right or wrong behavior from right behavior. So people from all walks of life, young, old, or small, rich or poor, share some of the same basic concepts of moral values. Okay, and you see that box right there underneath that, get a mental snapshot of that right and wrong on one side and a line that divides the two. And keep that in your mind, that moral values. And of course, as we move along, and we'll see these phrases, these terminologies, you'll see it throughout the Peaceful Solution, continuously repeat it, because as you repeat something over and over and over and over again, it becomes easier to recall and to put into practice, or recall the information and so forth. And so you're going to see that moral values, morals, moral principles, rules, and things like that continuously repeated through this course, because in life, there are always rules. Now, some people will say, well, rules are meant to be broken, right? Well, that's an immoral statement. And because if rules were meant to be broken, then there would be no rules at all, right? People don't design things in order for them to be broken. They design things in order for there to be a system of cooperation. They design rules in order for there to be safety. Rules are there like the rules of the road, right? If everybody just did whatever they wanted to do on the road, we'd have mass chaos. And we kind of do to some degree, because people don't respect the rules. Okay, and of course, they don't understand the moral value that separates right from wrong, so they make the decision. I've seen people drive on sidewalks. I've been traveling down when I lived back up in Ohio, and I used to go see people in southwest Ohio. I mean, people would be speeding down the road, and they travel and pass in the passing lane. Well, if there were too many cars over there, they'd break the rules and pass on the berm, on the side of the median, where people like stop to change their tires, and I remember when I saw it, I thought, man, what if somebody was actually broke down and changing their tire, and somebody's driving 80 miles an hour down the side of the berm there, right? They wouldn't have enough time to stop, and it was nighttime as well. And so we're going to look into a little bit some of these risk-taking behaviors and the things that lead to this mindset where people don't value the rules. Because I don't think that those people were evil, or that they were out looking to just destroy things. But when we don't have value for keeping the rules or upholding these moral values or these moral principles, and when you think of principles, you think of rules as well, keep that in your mind, then we're more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors that can bring harm to ourselves, others, and the environment. And remember, that's something that you're going to hear continuously, because when we teach in the Peaceful Solution regarding making right choices, we want people to understand that a right choice is not based on your own opinion, right? And as the previous teacher spoke last week, remember, we want to get our understanding for this Peaceful Solution and its application in our lives, our definitions from this resource right here, okay? And so, anything that will bring harm to ourselves, others, or the environment, then we want to stay away from, okay? If it benefits us, if it adds to, if it's healthy, then okay, that's something that we could incorporate into our lives or our actions and things of that nature. All right, so we talk about morality being divided into three basic categories, and that's where the teacher last class left off there. And we'll just go over those three basic categories again. And the first one, we see behavior and attitude towards all life, and that's human, animal, and plant. Life doesn't stop with just us, what do we call it, bipedal people, walking on the earth. Life is all around us. It's taking place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even things that we cannot see, the animals and the plants, are necessary for our survival as humans. We won't get too deep into it, but I mean, think about every single one of us right now in here are breathing oxygen, right? And you think about about 70% of our oxygen comes from marine life, marine plants. And you think about why we have so much ocean here on our planet. But as we continually pollute that ocean life, it reduces the amount of plant life that can produce that oxygen. And scientific studies have shown, that our quality and levels of oxygen within our air, there's many components that make up our air, nitrogen and things of that nature, oxygen, nitrogen, a lot of other things. I don't know all the chemical terms, the technical terms for them, but oxygen plays a big part. right? And so if that's reduced, then it makes it more difficult for us to breathe. And everyone knows, or most of us know, that our brains require oxygen to function. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the term of hypoxia, but it's when the brain is depleted of oxygen. And you see this sometimes when there's a drop in pressure at high altitudes, or even on airplanes, and the pressure, the cabin pressure drops, then the people in the cabin, or the pilots and so forth, they can suffer from hypoxia, which they get disoriented and lightheaded, and eventually they can pass out and not be able to function. So these are just some of the things that are important, that sometimes when things are not directly in front of us, we tend not to think about them. But that's one of the things about the peaceful solution, is it gives us a broader range of thinking about things. It makes us to look at life around us, our environment, as more than just us and the people that we're hanging around with, or more than just us in our house, or more than just us in our neighborhood. Because the things that we do, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that, the things that we do, it ripples outward and can affect halfway around the globe. Our choices can affect people halfway around the globe. And so that's why it's very important to understand why it's necessary to develop and maintain a positive character, first and foremost within us. Remember, the peaceful solution is focused on the individual, us who are learning this information here. And then we can see clearly to be able to help other people to build a positive character as well, through influence, through teaching, and setting a great example. And so here, at the very beginning here, let me get the other 2 points there. So we have behavior and attitude towards all life. That's human, animal, and plant. Behavior and attitude towards possessions and property. And as we're going to cover here, if we get to that point, I'm pretty sure we will, that everybody owns things. Everything is owned by someone. And, society sometimes has these sayings, possession is 9/10 of the law. All right. Well, if it's in your possession, more than likely it belongs to you. Well, a lot of people steal things and have them in their possessions. That doesn't mean that it belongs to them. A lot of people squat in other people's property when they're not there. That doesn't mean that it's their possession or that it belongs to them. So again, we have to go back to a standard that, like we read out here at the very top of the paragraph here, some values that all people share. Nobody wants their possessions stolen from. Nobody wants their belongings misused or damaged or destroyed. Generally speaking, everybody wants their belongings. They want to have a peace of mind that if they leave, they're going to come back to that in the same condition that it was. Save some type of environmental disaster that nobody has control over. But, they don't want to see their things, their belongings damaged or stolen. And then lastly, there is behavior and attitude towards the environment. Okay? And as we're going to learn, our environment consists of everything that's around us. Now, the previous teacher covered procedure 3 there, which was to explain to students that the values are principles or qualities that we consider important, although values in general are not standardized but varied based upon the individual, what the individual deems important. Kind of like right now, in this part of the hemisphere, at least in the United States, it's kind of chilly right now. And I know up north, a lot of the places are getting a lot more snow. So right now, most people value warmth. Most people value heat. But in the middle of Texas in June or July or August, not many people are valuing turning on the heat when they come home. They value that air condition. So we can see that our values do tend to change depending on, certain things, or partly our environment, but as well as what we deem important. And okay, Sarah says here, values are internalized by all people. There are certain values that are internalized by all people, and these are called moral values. And we just covered that there on page 8. And then we did some reading there. So before we get into procedure 4, let's finish up with the previous teacher covered here on page 9. So we're going to be looking here at the second paragraph on page 9, because we're still covering behavior and attitude towards all life. And so it says here, did you know that in addition to showing this attitude towards others, that is showing an immoral attitude towards human life that was covered in the previous paragraph there. So did you know that in addition to showing this immoral attitude towards others, individuals could also display this same attitude towards themselves? Yes. People sometimes tend to think, well, it's my body, I'll do what I want to. Okay, and sure, you do have some rights concerning your body, but the goal here of the peaceful solution is not to dispute that. It's to point out that we want to make decisions concerning even our bodies, right? Our possessions, our bodies, and the things that belong to us, our things that we own. We want to make decisions concerning those things based on those moral values. We don't want to do anything with ourselves or our possessions or our environment that would bring harm to us or other people. So it says choices that involve risk-taking behaviors such as premarital sex and drugs and alcohol abuse are examples of ways in which millions of people devalue their lives. And of course, this is taking place all over the world today. It has been for a very long period of time. People devalue their lives. They don't see the value. They don't see or understand or realize that they do have value and that they're important. So then they make choices and decisions based on the way they feel. And, someone made a statement regarding suicide. They said, it's sad to see that a person would make a permanent decision for a temporary problem, right? Because when you commit suicide and you're successful, then that's it. It's done. You don't get a do-over for it, right? And a lot of times it's just people don't realize that there is help that's available for them. People that can guide them and show them and point them in the right direction and help to instill that value back in their mind. Because as we're going to cover when we get into the next chapter here, there are dysfunctions within a family. There is abuse sometimes that takes place within a family. And a child who grows up in that environment, well, it's hard for them to discern, as we covered at the very beginning, people are ill-equipped to make decisions regarding life's choices. As adults, we are. So how much more our children? And so they engage in these types of behaviors because they have a mindset, well, nobody else cares for me, so why should I care for myself? Well, this is the turning point with the peaceful solution, to get them to understand that, yes, people do care for them. We do care for others. Even if we don't know them, we care for them. When we uphold these moral values, these principles, and we follow these rules, we're actually showing care and concern for people that we've never met. And that's the beauty of it, because you don't have to sit in front of a person, or they don't have to be in front of your in front of your face, or be in your immediate family to actually show regard for life. And so just keep that in mind. It says choices that involve risk-taking. Oh, so I just read that. It says these behaviors are the leading cause of sexually transmitted diseases, degeneration of the mind and health, and dangerous driving practices, all of which can lead to death. Okay, and as the first teacher talked about some of those statistics there, where 20 million new cases of STDs are reported every year, with half of those being 10 million of young people. Okay, and this is the environment that they're growing up in, to where they're not valuing themselves enough to, not engage in certain types of risk-taking behaviors. In fact, going right along with that, this is from the CDC.gov, and it's the sexually transmitted disease surveillance from 2018, and it says there, independent or incidences and prevalence estimates suggest that young people age 15 to 24 years old, and that's usually the median group that they give for young people, 15 to 24, and that's also the age after that, which a lot of other companies base things on. I know with insurance, 25 years old and over, I guess they have a tendency to think you're making better choices at that time. You would if you had character education, but for the most part, it's 15 to 20 years old. They acquire half of all new STDs, which, like we mentioned before, 10 million per year. That's per year. Now, compared with older adults, active adolescents aged 15 through 19 years and young adults aged 20 through 24 years of age are at higher risk of acquiring STDs for a combination of behavioral, biological, and cultural reasons. Okay, and so we're seeing that we keep in mind that some of these things that are acquired in people's youth, the STDs and the diseases, a lot of times they don't rear their heads, so to speak, until later on in life. And some of the consequences of these diseases tend to affect the mind, along with blindness and joint problems and things of that nature. Well, if you don't have your mind to be able to function to the capacity that it was designed to, well, you're not going to really make the best of choices. So it's important that, yes, the peaceful solution is used as a means of intervention when people have already made poor choices, but it works even better when it's used as a preventative to keep people from making bad choices to begin with, right? I think most of us can think back in our lives based on what we've learned here in the character education program or just life lessons in general. If we had to do over again, we would do it a lot differently. We would do it a lot better. We'd make a lot better choices as we grew up. Well, as I say, hindsight is 20/20 vision. And so all we can do from this point is work on turning our characters around, and as that's the goal of the peaceful solution, to change the heart and the mind, to change the character of the person. Well, here's another statistic here from the CDC, and it's talking about substance abuse amongst teens, because these are some of these risk-taking behaviors that young people get involved in. It says the guide highlights the most commonly used substances and the extent of the problem, such as alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco, as these being the substances most commonly used by adolescents. And it says by 12th grade, about 2/3 of students have tried alcohol. About half of 9th through 12th grades students reported ever having used marijuana, and 4 in 10 9th through 12th grade students reported having tried cigarettes. And among 12th graders, close to 2 in 10 reported using prescription medicine without a prescription. And prescription abuse is something that's continually on the rise, especially with the epidemic of the opioid crisis, which has been affecting many people throughout the United States and, of course, throughout the world. Let's see here. Some of these risks here of substance use. This guide highlights some of the risk of substance use amongst teens. It shows that it affects the growth and development of teens, especially brain development, which again I said, we've got to have our brains to be able to function, to be able to think. Remember, that's part of how we make our decisions. That's part of how our actions come about. Our actions are the end result of our thoughts, right? Thoughts, feelings, and actions. Well, if you're thinking facilities, your brain is not working well enough for you to think, then you're going to probably make some bad choices, and as a result, you're going to suffer some consequences for your actions. It says here, it occurs more frequently. Let me back up here. Substances can do the following: occur more frequently with other risk-taking behaviors, such as dangerous driving, which is one of the things we're going to talk about here. Contributes to the development of adult health problems such as heart disease, high blood pressure, and sleep disorders. It says, finally, the earlier teens start using substances, the greater their chances of continuing to use substances and developing substance use problems later in life. When teens begin drinking at an early age, they increase the chance of becoming addicted to or continuing to abuse substance later in life. So again, it's better to prevent that to begin with than for them to get involved with it, because you have another instance such as addiction that comes into play as well. And sometimes it's very difficult for people to break addictions. But had they not got caught up in that to begin with, of course, through education, then they wouldn't be in that difficult situation that they're in. I think most of us older people can remember the Just Say No program that was back in the 80s, right? And it was to convince or influence young children to not engage in abusing drugs or taking drugs, right? Just say no. Just say no. And in theory, that's a great concept, but why should the children just say no? It's like telling your child, well, don't do that. Make right choices. Just make right choices. But if you don't give them the tools that enables them to make right choices and enables them to weigh out their decisions, to have a dividing line that separates right from wrong, then they're going to be inquisitive and go, well, why should I just say no? I've seen this other person do it. They seem to be walking around. They seem to be functioning just fine. They're driving a big fancy car. They've got all types of jewelry and a big fancy house, right? So it's very important to lay that foundation, and this is why we give it to them in the Peaceful Solution. It's important to lay that foundation in the child's mind of the difference between positive and negative, moral and immoral, right and wrong behavior. Let's see here. All right, so it says these behaviors are the leading causes of STDs, degeneration of the mind and health, and dangerous driving practices, all of which can lead to death. And then next thing it says here, self-mutilation, which is to willfully cut one's own body, and suicide are individual ways in which an individual disregards the value of his own life. Okay, they disregard the value of their own life. And that's, like Chris said a couple classes ago, when we go to these auditoriums, when we went to these auditoriums and we did presentations with students, and there were 300, 400, 500 students there, we knew that there were students in there, or even in the classrooms, that had gone through a lot of these things or were going through a lot of these things that we were covering in the Peaceful Solution. And it's sad when you think about it, because this sometimes that becomes the norm for that child. They think, and I've heard a lot of stories where a child thought, I thought it was normal for, my parent to hit me, or to see my parents, hitting one another or abusing one another, or coming home and just drinking until the time they went to bed, or doing drugs. They thought that was normal because that is what was in their environment. So when they became of age, they didn't see anything wrong with engaging in those same type of behaviors. Because remember, our families are our first, influence as we grow up, because we spend the first 5-6 years at home, and we spend more time than that, but before we start really interacting with a lot of people. So they put a big part of their values in front of us, even if they don't realize that that's what they're doing. Okay? And so when the child gets older, then they start engaging in those same type of risky behaviors, and the cycle continues. Sometimes they see that it's wrong and they don't want to do it, and they break the cycle, right? And they start making changes in their lives to go down the right path. So it says here, moral principles can also be applied to the environment and how we care for it. We need air, water, plants, and animals to survive, and all of these things make up our environment. When everyone does their part to care for our environment by not polluting the earth or using harsh man-made chemicals that contaminate our atmosphere and water, we are demonstrating regard for all life. All right? And so let's just look at that there. Moral principles can be applied to the environment and how we care for it. So just real quick there, if you turn back to 169 in your book here, that's going to take us back to the glossary there. And these definitions, of course, are from the American Heritage Dictionary. And at the very bottom there on 169, we see the word there, environment. And this is just a general idea here. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But it says the environment is the circumstances or conditions that surround one. It's also surroundings. So, I had to look up the word circumstances, and it is a lot of definitions, but generally speaking is modifying or influencing factor. Circumstances are modifying or influencing factor. Remember, we talk about, people's values and how they can change. They can change based on your environment, right? Some people might not value running, right, or any type of exercise, right? But if they were to be faced with a pack of wild wolves coming around the corner chasing them, they're going to value running. and they're going to value the fact that they can run. So that circumstance changed what they valued at that time. And of course, because they valued their life, right? So they booked it and got out of there. But it's a modifying or influencing factor. The word modifying is to change somewhat the form or qualities of, or to alter partially. To alter partially. To change somewhat the form or qualities of, and to alter partially. Okay, and this is a part of what makes up our environment, because remember, if you go back to page 4, and then that first paragraph there, kind of the last sentence in that first paragraph, it says whether the character we have is positive or negative depends upon many factors. These factors include, of course, genetics, family values, experiences, choices, influences, experiences, choices, and environment. Okay, so our environment plays an important role in the shaping of our character, because why? There are things that modify or influence, how we think about things, how we look at things, right? So I think someone mentioned, I think everybody's either looked at getting a new car or purchased a new car, and then, later on down the road, you start seeing all these cars that look like your car, right? Is it that everybody started buying a car like that? No. It's just now that influence, now you're more aware of it. You're more aware of that particular model of car, and you're just seeing more of it. Well, it's the same thing, when we have these things in our lives, and we, of course, this is a goal, is to put the peaceful solution there, see the difference between right and wrong. And when we put these things as a part of our environment and rehearse these things over and over, then we start looking for and seeing opportunities to make right choices, or we start seeing, oh yeah, that's a negative attitude right there, or somebody's trying to convince me to do something that would be considered immoral. Well, what are the rules? Should I do this or shouldn't I do this? Well, let me look back and see, what the moral value is, or the moral principle is, and let that be the determining factor of what's right and what's wrong. So these are the things that help to shape our character, our genetics, family values, experiences, influences, choices, and environment. And it says to change somewhat, remember the word modifying is to change somewhat the form or qualities of, or to alter partially. Now, if you just hold your page there on page 9 and close your book and look at the front of your book there, and you'll see the goal of the peaceful solution. It is to change the heart and the mind. To change the heart and the mind, okay? And of course, we have the ability to have an influence on our environment, to alter our environment, to make changes and put influences in front of us that will help us to remember these positive values, right? These positive character traits, these lessons from the peaceful solution. In fact, I would encourage you, when you go home, to take some of these concepts that really stand out and that are important to you, right? And to just write down, like maybe on a Post-it note or a 3x5 card or a 8x8.5 by 11 sheet, and just write something down, nice, big, bold, maybe possibly even have your children color it for you, and put it on a mirror and put it in different places in the house, in your environment, to remind you about these concepts that we're learning here, so that they'll always be before you. There's a statement, out of sight, out of mind. And if we don't go back and rehearse the things that we learned on a continual basis, then we tend to forget them. I think it's pretty common for all of us. So if we put reminders up before us and make that a part of our environment, it'll influence us to remember what we've learned and to put those things into practice, so that we'll never be caught off guard, right? We'll always be thinking about this. We'll be putting it into practice continuously, so we'll never be caught off guard and make a choice that can bring consequences or harm to ourselves, others, or the environment. All right, and so it says, regarding that, it says we need air, water, plants, and animals to survive, and all of these things make up our environment. And I was just going to bring something to your attention here in regards to, well, I think I have it, in regards to, oh, there it is, animals, because we think about animals and we think mostly cats and dogs and cows and horses and bears and sheep and so forth. But since the advent of the microscope, which is a long time ago, we've been able to see a whole new world of living organisms. And most of us are familiar with macro, which is larger forms or size of things. And then there's also a micro, which is much smaller. And there's a term called micro animals. And micro animals are so small that they can be visually observed only under a microscope. Unlike most other organisms that are unicellular, microanimals are unique because they are multicellular like all other animals. So, keep this in mind too when we're talking about protecting our environment, because there are billions and billions and billions of animals or microorganisms that we can't see, that when their balance gets off, then it actually can come back and affect us in a negative way. It can hurt us in a negative way. Like even our bodies, I think the average human has about 2 to 3 pounds of bacteria, in and on their body at any given time. And that bacteria is there to do a job to help that person to stay healthy. Right now, we can't see that bacteria, but it's there. Disrupt that bacteria in your gut or in your digestive system, and you'll start feeling the pain that comes as a result of that. You got to start feeding it back with healthy bacteria. Well, all these things, they help to make up our environment, and it's up to us to do our part in following the rules. Again, we're talking about moral values, the line that separates right from wrong, and the principles that guide us or show us the rules that we need to follow so that we don't bring destruction or harm to those animals, plant, air, and water. It says, within our lifetime, the responsibility of our planet and its resources will define our concern for future generations. Why? Because what we do now is going to be left to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so forth, right? And so if we truly care, remember I said earlier, the things that we do can affect somebody halfway around the world. Well, not just halfway around the world, it can affect somebody 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, halfway around the world, or in our own neighborhood or in our own family. So we want to make choices that bring about positive results both now and in the future. It says, in addition to this, we can also display a moral attitude towards animals by treating them kindly and not condoning any form of animal cruelty. Animal cruelty disregards the fact that every animal has a purpose that benefits mankind and the earth and the food supply. Yes, even snakes and rats and all those things we don't like crawling over our legs while we're sleeping at night, they have a benefit and they have a purpose. And people who just go out of their way, like was mentioned earlier, wouldn't go out of my way to add to my list of friends anybody who would step on a bug, right? Who will go out of their way just to step on the bug. Oh, well, there's a roach all the way over there. Let me run halfway over there and step on it, right? Sometimes people will go out of their way to do harm to an animal. And unless the animal is threatening you or your family or food supply or things of that nature, just let the animal do what it needs to do. In most cases, unless the animal is sick, like with rabies, they don't really want to have anything to do with you, right? They're just investigating and, going about their lives. And in a lot of cases, neighborhoods have been built in areas that once was their home. So now they've got to readjust because their environment has changed. But, we shouldn't do or condone any form of cruelty to animal, because that animal has a life, and that life is important. Even if we don't fully understand why that animal has benefit, we shouldn't just eliminate it because we don't like it, right? Animal cruelty disregards the fact that every animal has a purpose that benefits mankind, the earth, and the food supply. They must be kept alive. In addition, we need to watch out for their health. And again, this is just, this is not necessarily going out and buying, rat food and snake food so you can sit outside to feed the snakes and the rats. No, it's just doing your part to show respect to the environment. Doing your part to show care for all life. And their food and everything is provided for them. Water is provided for them. Not doing things that would create danger or harm for them. Like some people will dig holes and not cover them. And then animals who are out nocturnal, they'll fall in the hole and they'll get trapped there. Well, then they starve to death. Okay? So, I mean, these are part of the things that we can do to actually protect them and make sure that they have the things that they need, or not destroying the environment that they rely on for food and shelter. Okay? It says every year animals are neglected, abused, tortured, and killed for sport rather than for food. There have been numerous studies done that show that many serial killers engage in immoral acts toward animals by torturing and dismembering them prior to murdering human beings. And of course, in the process of this taking place, as we'll learn much later in the program here, is that creates a state of desensitization to that person. They start to care less for life. And some people might think, well, it's just a cat. There's thousands, there's millions of cats around here. That's just a dog, it yaps. No. When you do things that bring harm to something over a period of time, you're going to become desensitized to it. And sadly, not only will that person become desensitized to it, they'll start craving it. They'll start craving seeing of something in pain or something bleed out or things of that nature, and then an animal's not enough, so then they move on to the bigger prey, which is in this case, sadly, humans. And so these are some of the things that have actually been shown and studied and researched that, a lot of serial killers get their start doing that to animals, or as we read here on the previous paragraph, previous page. People direct acts of cruelty towards those who are weaker and unable to defend themselves. All right, so look at the bottom of the page there. It says, take a bite out of this. Life is precious. Handle it with morality. And again, remember, like we covered here, let's see here. Well, you can just kind of write down there for your side note there. All life has value. All life has value. All right. So now we're going to move on to page 10 here, because we're going to get on to behavior and attitude towards possession and property. And on the procedure number 4 there, we're going to look at the fact that I'm going to talk about explaining to the students another critical aspect where morals must be applied is in regards to possessions and property of others. Because the value people, let me read that again. Explain to students another critical aspect is where morals must be applied is in regards to the possession and property of others because of the value people place on their possessions. Have students, so we're going to look at page 10 through 11. We're going to cover that, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, and page 12 and 13. And we're going to talk a little bit about when we behave morally towards the possessions of others by respecting their right of ownership, it shows respect and willingness to live peaceably with them. Having moral values towards people and their possessions is a critical factor of demonstrating positive character traits that will lead to peaceful relations. And of course, one of the beautiful things about the peaceful solution is when you read this, of course, we're in the character unit right now, and we'll get into acceptance, self-control, respect, and responsibility to follow. But all of those latter units are incorporated in this first one, right? And so, and what's in the other units incorporates all the other 4 units, right? And so we see this all being tied in together and reiterating. You can't have one without the other. This is like we mentioned earlier, it's like a recipe in making a cake. You have to have all the ingredients, and sometimes you have to go back to the ingredient page and look at what it is that you need to add and make sure that everything's in there, or make adjustments as needed so that the cake comes out the way it was designed to, or our characters are built the way that the peaceful solution is working to design them in. In page 10 here, let's turn over to page 10, and now we're going to look at that other category of morality, behavior and attitude towards possessions and property. And at the very top it says, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. Okay? And I just wrote there, this is covering possession and property. It says, behaving morally in regards to the possession and property of others means to recognize that everyone owns things and values what they own. Okay, everyone owns things and values what they own, and of course, recognizing that, that would set in our mind, as we're going to cover here, the importance of making sure that we respect these rights of ownership. It says what one person values, another might not, but it is still necessary to respect the possession of others, just as you would want your belongings respected, or do to other people that you what you want done to you. Did you know that you have rights concerning what belongs to you? This is called the right of ownership, the right of ownership. In fact, just to show you here how important this is, and even in the law, there are certain rights that are afforded people. Of course, everybody wants to bring that out when they get pulled over by a police officer. I know my rights, right? Well, you do know that you have the right to keep others safe on the road, and if you break those rules, right, then you take away other people's rights of safety. When you speed, or you're driving recklessly, or you're driving under the influence of a substance, right, you also have the right to go to jail or to remain silent as they read your Miranda. But this word right here, it's from, I believe it's from dictionary.com, and it says, it's plural rights, that which is morally correct, just, or honorable. And that is referred to the word right. Well, that's the right thing to do, okay? But it is also, in regards to law, it says a moral or legal entitlement to have or obtain something or to act in a certain way. And you've probably heard your parents, or somebody who was kind of throwing a tantrum or yelling at somebody say, you have no right to act that way, right? Because they're acting in a way that is immoral or improper. But it is a moral or legal entitlement to have or obtain something. And this is, we're talking about here on page 10, rights of ownership. So people have a moral or legal entitlement to their belongings. When you own something, it simply means it belongs to you. And there's many ways that we can get our belongings. We can, of course, purchase them or trade for them, and things can be actually given to us. We can inherit them and so forth. But when you acquire them within those means, then they legally belong to you. Okay, not that 9/10 thing, possession. No, they are yours, and they're yours until you transfer that right of ownership to somebody else. Just like when a car is purchased, you're buying that car from the owner, and that owner is transferring that right of ownership from them to you with the exchange of money or trade-in or whatever it is, right? And so now it's no longer theirs, it's yours, and you have the rights of ownership regarding that vehicle. Even here in wikipedia.org, it says rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. That is, rights are the fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of people or owed to people according to some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. Now, of course, these things can even vary depending on where you go. Different countries have different rights. And there are even organizations that are designed that are international that protect human rights, right? In fact, in regards to people being able to live healthy, peaceful, safe, in a safe environment, those human rights are afforded to people, right? And even people who are in prison, they have rights. They have basic human rights that they should be afforded food and clothing and shelter and not to be abused. Well, it's the same thing with rights of ownership. This says this means you have the authority to make decisions about what you own. Now, of course, we're kind of a step ahead of everybody with the peaceful solution here, because just because you own something doesn't mean you can use it however you want to use it. We have to keep in mind, and I wrote there on the side there, moral decisions. Moral decisions. Yeah, a person can own a gun. Does it mean that they can go out and just shoot everybody's window just because it's theirs? It's my gun. I'll go out and shoot it if I want to. You can't tell me it's mine. People own cars. Doesn't mean they can drive on the sidewalks, right? And speed down a 35-mile-an-hour road at 102 miles an hour. No. It is yours, but you have the authority to make decisions about what you own. But those decisions must also fall in line with the rules that govern life, that govern moral values, that govern moral principles, that govern safety for all who are involved. So, it's like children when parents give their child something and they say, this is your belonging, but these are the rules that you have to follow regarding your belongings. Here's a bicycle, but I don't want you riding it out in the street. Don't let anybody borrow it, right? And so there's nothing wrong with having rules set regards to your belongings because for most of us, and just in life in general, the things we own, we have to follow rules regarding it. You also have the right to enjoy what you own without fear that it could be stolen. Recognizing this moral concept means accepting that everyone else has authority and rights of ownership over his or her possession as well. So it's not only us, but others too. People tend to forget that until it involves them. People tend to not respect the rights of ownership until somebody wants to come and take their belongings. And then all of a sudden, now they're all like, hey, rights of ownership, right? But what about when they were taking somebody else's belongings without asking, taking their tools out of the toolbox without asking? All right, so we have to show that same regard or respect in our behavior and attitude towards the possessions and others, possession and property of others, just as we want that afforded to us, and we have rights concerning our belongings. Respecting others' rights benefits you as well as them. Now it says here, can you recall a time when you made a decision about something you own and your decision was not accepted? Did your friends or family members try to pressure you into changing your mind? How did it make you feel? Have you ever done this to someone else? This has caused many problems, even between friends. So what's the answer to the problem? Well, look at the very bottom there, and it says, accept decisions others make concerning their belongings. And as a note there, even if they don't respect your decisions, still respect their decisions, okay? Because it can be very easy to have a mindset of retaliation and go, well, they went into my closet and took my belongings without asking, so I don't see a problem with going into their closet and taking their belongings without asking. They didn't respect my rights of ownership, so why should I respect their rights of ownership? Okay, again, we're working to develop a positive character. Remember what we learned in the preface at the very beginning of this program, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So you going into that person's closet and taking their belongings without asking does not make you any more right than they were by doing that to you. And again, this is a road less traveled. This is not always an easy thing to do. It's not always easy to abide by the rules when everyone around you is breaking the rules and trying to encourage you to break the rules. And it's very difficult for our young people, not only when they see that, but when they see that when people are breaking the rules, they make it look so fun and enjoyable. So we have to keep these things in mind when we're teaching them, because this is kind of the environment that they're in and what they have to deal with. Not even leaving their house. All they have to do is pick up a phone or a tablet or turn on the internet, and boom, it's there as an influence to get them to want to practice or participate in these risk-taking behaviors. So let's look at the little side cartoon there. It says, can I borrow your book? No, I can't lend my stuff out. And then at the very bottom, the girl says, oh, come on, that's not fair. I let you borrow mine, and you call yourself a friend? And that sometimes is a form of a peer pressure, which we're going to cover a lot. There's a lot of stuff we're going to cover, so don't miss any classes, because we're kind of hint to some of the things that's going to be covered in these following chapters. And it's very important to understand this foundation that's being laid right now, okay? Because it'll make everything else that comes later make a whole lot of sense to you. Let's look at page 11 there. It says, you can behave morally in regards to ownership by asking permission before touching or using someone's belongings. But asking alone is not enough. Now, here's the key here. Asking alone is not enough. You must also accept the response, even if it's no. And, this is something that's taught to the very young, pre-K kindergartners, is that no is okay. It's okay as an owner or the owner to tell you, no, you cannot use my belongings. So it's even if the answer is no, and see the need for yourself to have the same right to say no at any time you choose. Now, authority over one's possession means you have the right to decide who uses your possessions, when they are used, and how they are used. Okay? And of course, a lot of times this is covered in the generalized phrase of borrowing. Borrowing someone's belongings, the owner can tell you if you can use them or if you can't, when it's used and how it's used. If you let somebody use your tools, of course you expect for them to take care of them. Don't leave them out in the rain. Don't use them for what they're not intended to, like not using a screwdriver for a cold chisel, right? You use a hammer on the back of a screwdriver. If it's not designed for that, you'll end up busting the handle up, right? And some of these tools are very, very expensive. So it's important that we understand what the owner's rules are regarding their belongings and that we respect those things. If we don't think that we're going to do it, then we don't need to use their belongings. We need to go and buy our own or find out a different way to obtain things. But it's very important to respect those rights of ownership. Not being able to accept someone's decision about their belongings usually creates conflicts and hurt feelings. And it's not because somebody said no, because remember what we said, the owner has the right to say no regarding their belongings. We have the right to say no regarding our belongings, or who uses them, or when they use them, or how they use them. That is not the creating of the conflict. The key word here is not being able to accept, not accepting someone's decision about their belongings. Okay? So it's important for us to, this is why we're going through this here, understand what the rights of ownership are, and why it's important to respect those rights of ownership. And even if we really want something and that person tells us no, we don't argue with them, right? We don't try to force them to change their mind or put, a lot of pressure on them, or get friends to try to encourage them to, that sometimes people will get other people to try to encourage them to change their mind or their decision. No, we just simply accept the answer and let it be. Did you know you also have to be moral about how you get the things you want? Here's the bottom line. Unless something is legally and honestly obtained, it does not belong to you. There are many legal and honest ways to obtain the things you want. For example, you can work for it and save your earnings. If you are a minor and you are unable to work at a job, you can earn money by doing chores such as raking leaves, mowing lawns, shoveling snow. You're not going to do too much down here in Texas, but you can get that at least that one day a year we get snow, or babysitting. Other ways to acquire things legally and honestly are to have them awarded to you, as in the case of having excelled in school, or through inheritance, or as a gift from your parents. So it says here, a moral person recognizes that the rights of ownership are extended towards items that are lost. And this is very important because, even though someone's belonging is lost, it still belongs to them, right? And that's what we're going to talk about here. Lost items still belong to the owner, and the owner is therefore entitled to have his property returned. In fact, you'll see a lot of times around the neighborhood, I used to see around the neighborhood, people who would lose their animals, right? They lose their animal, or a bike was stolen, or something was stolen off of their porch or out of their yard, and they'll post up signs and posters with phone numbers on it, lost. If found, please call this number or return to this place, okay? Because they understand their rights of ownership, and they're wanting to make people aware that something of mine is gone, so if you see it, please let me know. That old adage, finders keepers, losers weepers, is not displaying a moral attitude. Think about it for a minute. If your belongings were lost, wouldn't you want someone to return them to you? A great attitude is to always treat the other person the way you want to be treated, or the way you would like the other person to treat you. An immoral attitude towards the belongings of others results in misunderstandings and hostilities. For example, you saved all summer to buy a bike, and on the first day you got it, your brother took it for a spin around the block without first asking you. Well, since you were unaware that he had taken your bike, you assumed it was stolen, and frantically you called the police and reported the bike stolen. Let me just finish this last part here. It says, because this simple moral principle is ignored, crimes such as theft, burglary, and grand larceny are rampant, in our society. Not only can ignoring this moral principle lead to theft, it can also lead to murder. There are many news stories that show that during the process of a robbery or holdup, people are often killed. And sadly, people do lose their lives or are sometimes permanently injured or, paralyzed when they attempt to break into a person's home, or not even a person's home. They attempt to break into a store or just to rob a store, right? They don't even have to break in. They walk right in and rob it. And a lot of times people are, they're armed because they, it's their right to do so and to protect their belongings, and they're not hesitant to shoot back if you're coming at them with deadly force. And so it's best to, remember the ways that we can get the things legally and morally according to the rules. And of course, that will eliminate these consequences of permanent injury or death. So we're gonna stop right there in regards to we're still covering behavior and attitude towards possession and property, and we'll pick back up there on page 12 for our next class, which will be 12/6/2020 here, 12/6, and that will be at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great evening.